So I'm live. This only took like 3 hours to figure out what's wrong with my cheap ass computer. Hi there, you know who I am and I know who you are. At least I think I do. And this is a YouTube live feed. Let's see. If I move like that, you know, there'll be some jackass like Rodney Corn and go, you should backlight or you should front light. Here, this looks okay. Yeah, that'll have to do. Today's topic is jaded in the OC, and this is a piece of jade right there. My wife has a lovely piece of jade jewelry. Now, the term jade is one of those words I teach to my students. And jade is obviously a mineral. And it's mined all over the world, but it is especially well known. Nice. And as a kid, I remember seeing my grandmother had some jade jewelry and little, baubles and bangles. And as a kid, I grew up to realize that to be sure my father was a little jaded. Hey, bring the helicopter directly over the house. Thanks. And the airplane. And drop some alien invaders in while you're at it. By the way, this week's episode brought to you by Coors Light. I'm officially one of those guys now who drinks diet beer. I prided myself on being a wide open glutton, but now with high cholesterol and warnings from my doctor, and the need to drop some weight and cut my carbs, which I know works. I'm not really complaining about it because it's not that bad for me because I enjoy that approach to diet, not a fad or something you do for a little while. So I've been doing real well, but if I'm going to have the occasional tipple, it's going to have to be Miller Lite or Coors Light or Michelob Ultra. And I decided that rather than drink Michelob Ultra, I would prefer Turkish prison rape. So I opted for Coors Light, but I'll leave it at that. 5 carbs in a can of Coors Light as opposed to 12 in Coors Banquet beer. Think about that, shall you? Anyway, today's little theme for me is the word jade as an adjective. Jade, as you know, or to be jaded, is to be weary of the world and the circumstances that have jaded you, where you've kind of lost your positive outlook, if you ever even had one, but it usually implies that the person who's jaded used to have an altruistic or optimistic or Pollyanna view of things. And as you've aged, you've lost your sense of optimism and you're just tired and jaded. And so words like, it kind of flies alongside words like bitter and cynical, but jaded is a safer word. You can get away with that and not send off too many trigger alarms. Speaking of trigger, there's that beautiful sound, even if it is just a Coors Light. So for you, Mike Clancy, you are not jaded, Mike. You're one of the most positive people I know. And I wanted you to know how much I admire you for that. Stephen Walswick, my friend Stephen, he's not jaded. My wife is not jaded. Many of my colleagues at school are not jaded, and my kids aren't jaded. So why am I? Well, I was thinking about the Asian connection because I live in a part of Orange County that is very heavily, in this particular neighborhood, it's particularly peopled by, this neighborhood is known as Little Gaza, actually. I didn't know that until I moved here. A lot of Palestinian, a lot of Arabic people in this neighborhood, a great many Lebanese. There's 3 or 4 Lebanese Christians, actually, not just Lebanese Muslims, but Lebanese Christians, Maronite Christians who own some of the businesses in this neighborhood. So I've gotten used to that. Food's fantastic. Obviously, there's a Latino presence here, a large Filipino community, Vietnamese community. But when you go to Garden Grove, like I did this morning at Costco, and when you go to Costco and you are, as a Irish heritage Yankee boy, puffy, pasty little bunsen that I am definitely in the minority, and that's fine by me. But I was thinking, okay, we live in a very divided time. Social media tells us that there are Trumpers, and they're all deplorable. that there are educated people and they're all left-leaning, liberal, progressives, whatever. Now, I flip that around. I know some deplorable people on both sides, and I know some educated people on both sides. But as anyone who knows me will tell you, just go ahead and put me in a room with the most left-leaning person there is. And when the blood is done flowing, I'm still going to have blood inside me. And chances are that supposedly better educated liberal progressive on the other side of me, not because I jammed him in the eye with this jade lancet, but because I have a rapier wit, an acid tongue, and a sharp sense of polemical savagery that I wield like a samurai sword. Maybe I shouldn't say samurai sword. I'm stealing from Asian culture, but it works, because it's nice to confuse Japanese and Vietnamese culture. Anyway, so an abundance of Vietnamese people all around me as I waited for gas in line, as I got in line to buy my items. But you know what? Here's the thing. And I'm not Pollyanna, and I'm not super optimistic, but I am jaded. And at any given moment, my wife will tell you that I can go off the deep end of jadedness very easily. But here's what pressed me to this topic. If I were really jaded, I would take the story that appeared in this week's LA Times, liberal agenda times, as I like to call it, the LA Times. Used to love it. Can't read it anymore. It's just too damn funny. The LA Times reported something that those of us who lived here have known was, if not official, definitely coming for a long time, that now Democrats outnumber Republicans in Orange County. They used to refer to this as the Orange Curtain. Now, in the 70s, when we moved here, in 72 with my grandmother and 74 with my folks, oh yeah, it was 6, 7 out of 10 people were Republicans. But it made sense. Reagan had just been governor. Moonbeam was the new governor, but nobody took him seriously down here anyway. He couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a Republican Anglo pasty white guy in office somewhere. There were always a few token liberals at Cal State Fullerton or something, but But we saw how things were shifting. Loretta Sanchez beat Bob Dornan in the 90s, and I helped get Bob elected on his youth team back in 1984 when he beat Patterson in a very liberal part of, at that time, a very liberal portion of Orange County, that was. And Ms. Sanchez has served long and effectively in her role. I don't even know if she's a congressman anymore around here. I know she's not our district. But as I look at the changing face of Orange County, I don't sit there and act the way that social media says I should, as a person who voted for Mr. Trump and is definitely a conservative. And by the way, Trump's not a conservative. As someone who identifies first as a Catholic, second as an American, a person who has friends and neighbors who are undocumented workers, aliens, whatever you want to call them. But I get along with wonderfully and hope that they are, I'm not calling up ICE to tell them, hey, look, these people, I'm pretty sure they're not from here. Go get them, because they're the enemy. I'm well aware of my surroundings. But as I was surrounded by Asian people today at the Costco, for about the 1 millionth time in a row that I've been there, my only problem is just directly rudeness. Every now and again, some crazy lady cuts me off in traffic, or some guy, sometimes not even an Asian one, rams their cart into me. I got hip checked by some octogenarian Asian woman there about 2-3 years ago. So I hip checked her back, and she sort of bounced off of the end cap like a pachinko ball. That's probably trigger language too, and I don't really give a shit. But when I encounter people, I take them as they are. So all I could think is that if I'm jaded, I would just be reviling the racial makeup of Garden Grove, Westminster, and all this, which is heavily populated by Asian Americans. But all I can think is that I like 99.2% of them. There's like 0.8 of the population of any ethnicity. They're just jackasses. They're rude. They swear, they curse, they're sullen, they're inconsiderate, they're disgusting. They're in my way. But most people aren't that way, of any ethnicity. So as I'm sitting there surrounded, Mr. Jaded here, yeah, nice muffler, dude. Mr. Jaded here in Orange County as part of the diminishing white minority isn't one bit worried about that. Because what I knew, and this is why I guess I'm not jaded, I have jade, but I'm not jaded. I guess one of the things that I really knew is I sat there and looked around and saw myself as literally the only white face for 200 feet around me at one point. I was literally surrounded by Asian Americans or Asian people, whatever they call themselves. Was that they were all there to buy food and things for their families who they love, just like I was. And the goal was to get in there and get the best price, get what you came for, and get the hell out of there and go back to their families. It wasn't that there are people in this room who voted for Hillary and their votes were turned away because the Russian bots stole the election for Trump, or these people need to go back where they came from because this country should be for Americans, like European immigrants. That's what social media tells me I am or what they are. And they drive a wedge betwixt us. Most people are not on social media. I know we're supposed to believe that half the country is, but that's bullshit. I'm sorry, I don't mean to disparage bulls or cows or the bovine population. I'll just insult horses. It's horseshit. How's that? Because I don't believe for even 1 second that we're as divided as social media says we are. I believe that sampling on social media is part of that distraction. It's part of that stir the pot, make people think that this matters. Hey, I'm on social media right now. I'm on YouTube, and soon this will be uploaded to my Facebook. Pretty soon, I'll be cross-posting a song lyric or in a private group a picture of my son into Facebook to share with neighbors and friends and loved ones. I'm part of the problem if I'm part of social media, but social media is not really a good thing. Social media is antisocial. And for the people that it brings together, and I'm mindful of that, and the good things that it does, whether it's a GoFundMe project to help a family that doesn't have money to pay for a surgery or something, or after a tragedy or the loss of their home in a flood or a fire. For all the good that it does, we already had these structures in place where neighbors help other neighbors. A black man and his Latino wife have moved in near us, and I got to meet them recently. And first thing I did was I said, hey, you got a son, he's 5 years old, I got a 5-year-old daughter. Let's get them together and have a play date. So we're going to do that. And I only mentioned the fact that he is African-American, a black man, because, well, he is. And when he went by, he complimented me on our home. And he asked me about the sign we have in front of the house about coyotes in the neighborhood. And I said, hey, you got to look out for your little guy here and for your wife. And, be careful when you go out at night because, in the early morning hours and the late night hours, you may just come across a predator. You may have to deal with a coyote. And here we are, not talking about politics, not divided by Trump or Clinton or what have you. Just talking about his son, my kids, and getting them together so they can play. And we've recently struck up a couple of friendships through church and school and just the neighborhood as a whole, because there's kids around here whose parents want to have things for their kids to do too. And we meet them at the playground, and the next thing you know, our kids are playing together. That's not part of social media, not nearly enough. And we don't want our kids on social media because we want their privacy and their childhood to stay as private and childlike as possible for as long as possible. So I guess if I am jaded, sometimes I am, give me the right amount of tequila and a bad mood, and yeah, I can be as jaded as the next guy. But, I think this is, it's a place that's in flux. My reasons, our reasons, Catherine and I's reasons for wanting to stay out of this mess is because we want to stay here in Orange County as long as possible. But there's a lot of things that are driving us out of here, and none of it has to do with the ethnic makeup of this area. All of it has to do with the worst state government we have ever had, with runaway taxation and unfriendly business environment, and just being taxed until our ears bleed. And because there is a rising crime problem here, and the homeless population has been addressed as aggressively as Anaheim can do it, but it isn't getting any better. And with the homeless population's increase in Orange County, especially in this neighborhood, crime has increased. I see it every day. I ride my bike through these streets. I'm not in some armored vehicle with tinted windows. I'm at ground level, rolling my fat ass along, seeing people on the sidewalks and having to go around them. And I'm not spitting on them, and I don't call the cops on them. But I do make it real clear that I don't want them in my yard endangering my kids with used prophylactics, dirty needles, and public defecation, which is something that I have to deal with, that I see on a daily basis in this neighborhood, not in front of my house. And then, then it just becomes what they call a NIMBY, not in my backyard problem. NIMBY. But I mean, show me a person who would be okay with that stuff happening in their backyard where their children were concerned. If I was a single guy and it was just me in a little apartment, and I have been that guy for most of my life, I spent a lot more time directly engaged with the great unwashed because I could afford to. And I still help out when I can, as I can, with that situation in Orange County. But the fact is, because of bad state and local government, that's why I have jadedness about the place I live and the streets where I live here. The people and the many colors and religions and backgrounds they come from, 99% of them are fine. And they pretty much always will be, because people are people, so why should we? Quote Depeche Mode. I'll never do that again. So anyway, it is now coming up on the 20-minute mark, so before I get too far gone, I'm going to sip another beer and wish you well wherever you may be. And I hope that this uploads cleanly and nicely. And I hope the sound quality is good. Having gone from being a Facebook Live direct person to now switching this thing over to YouTube and trying to get this channel going. Word of the week is jaded. The message of the week is hope. The product of the week is beer. And I stand before you as, sit before you actually, as just one more person who just loves his family and wants to just have a life with as little pain, suffering, and crime and intrusion in it as possible. And currently all things seem well, but until next week, when I have something else to bitch about or clarify, I leave you in the capable hands of the rest of the internet exploding around you. And probably far more interesting than this nonsense I just babbled about. Hasta la bye-bye, one and all.